I want to thank you all for joining this morning. As I walked around the room today, I think there's quite a few people in the room who actually know CORE and are members, but we also have non-members in the room and people that aren't really familiar with our organization, so I wanted to give you all a brief overview. So CORE is a not-for-profit association founded in 2005 in Canada, and it's all about helping organizations build stronger service partnerships. So what that means is, as the world moves towards the as-a-service model, everything as a service, we believe that with better education, keeping people better informed, we can have stronger partnerships, stronger service relationship, not just in IT, HR, and all throughout different facets of industries. We offer industry-leading education and through discussion forums like this every month to keep you informed on important topics that are dictated by the members. So if there is something that you say, hey, we as an organization are having issues with this, we want to hear about it, talk to CORE, we'll help put that together. Being a part of CORE is different than other associations. When you're a part of CORE, you have a job. Your job is not just to sit in the audience and learn. Your job is to also be on the stage. Today, we have people from TCS speaking and in the audience. We have CIBC speaking and in the audience. And I'll be looking at all the other members saying, hey, for you other banks, BMO, TD, looking at SimCorp, Scotia, what's going on in your industry? Where do you have industry expertise? And where can you help sit on a panel to help educate the environment? And it's not just about what you've done well. It's about what you haven't done as well. We've hosted sessions where people have come up and say, hey, here's what we did to handle this level of disruption, and it just didn't work. And they talk you through, this is why it didn't work, and help everyone understand steps to take or steps not to take to better their service partnerships. Every month, we'll host a discussion forum in Toronto. We also host sessions in Montreal and in Vancouver on all the leading topics. So last month, for those who are here, we talked about how to bring services back in-house. A lot of members are talking about that. Not that they're going to do it tomorrow, but they want to understand the steps. Today, we're talking about partnering for Agile. I don't think any organization here is not talking about Agile, so I think that's going to be an important subject. And then in December, we'll be talking about RPA and cognitive. So everyone who went to RPA, went to automation, thinking they're going to save 40, 50%. They're all promised all those big numbers of value and financial savings. Never happened. So what happened? Why did people not get the savings they were expected, and how to fix the ship? We also have our executive education schedule. A few people asked me this morning. We offer 2-day in-class education with leading experts from the industry. We bring in 2 professors and 2 guest speakers for a 2-day course. And the next one's coming up in November on transition. So let's talk more importantly about why we're here today. Every industry, every sector right now is talking about Agile. And you have 2 ends of the spectrum. We've talked to members who also said, we are now 100% Agile and we get it. Then I speak to a member in the same organization and they say, oh dear God, we don't get it. We don't know what's happening. And it's scary, right? Because Agile is so powerful, but is it being implemented correctly? Is it being used correctly? Or what are the myths and truths about Agile? So today we're going to talk about what happens when you have outsourced programs delivered in Agile. What happens if you have globally distributed teams? And globally could also mean in Toronto. Everyone here has an office in North York, Scarborough, Mississauga. And how do relationships need to change depending on Agile? When I talk about Agile, I get afraid. Because for the past 15 years I've been working in sourcing, we hear all the buzz terms. Cloud comes in and everyone says, yeah, we get cloud, we're 100% in the cloud. Then you find out, oh God, no, they're not. Then you hear things like DevOps, blockchain, and you have this mixture of people that either really understand it or they really don't. And when it comes to Agile, I worry about the 80-20 rule. It used to be that you get 80% of it and 20% you're kind of faking it, you understand what's going on. But in Agile, I worry it's becoming 20-80. In organizations that believe they're fully Agile, you have 20% of the team members who really, really, really get it, are doing it correctly. And then you have 80% who are trying to figure it out. So that's why we have today's session going on. Because if you want to know someone who's at the 100% and really knows what's going on, well, that's Apala Mukherjee. Apala's here from TCS. We thank her for flying in from Phoenix late last night. So I said, Toronto is kind of like Phoenix. It's not as cold as it used to be. Apala is the head of the Agile consulting practice at TCS. So if there's someone you want to ask questions to, Apala is that person. She spent 20 years working programs across North America in transformation, and she is the expert on Agile. We're fortunate to have her, so thank to her and thank you to TCS. But I want to introduce here on stage Apala Mukherjee.
Thank you, Rushi, for the great intro. But I have to say I'm very humbled because in my team, I have several people about whom I feel, well, I get to work with them and I even get paid for it. So they are the real experts. I help support them. So with that said, and Rushi very rightly said that if we are in a room, I'm sure if I ask several people about what is Agile, I'll get that many answers. And that's quite okay, because that's what Agile is. It's flexible. And so before we go to that topic about what is Agile, I just wanted to check if what we have here is what you want. So quick view of what we are going to cover this morning. We have a little bit about the trends. So continuing with the thought that Rushi started around where what we are seeing with Agile in the market today. Challenges that we are seeing, especially in partnerships. Distributed Agile, so a lot of it has to do with partnering, and in today's global economy, whether you partner or not, distributed team seems to be a reality that we all have to grapple with. And then, of course, how do you partner with Agile? Is that something that meets your expectation? Is that good? Super. So let's move on. So why Agile? So before we even get to what it is, why Agile? So just the other day, I was driving back home from school with my 12-year-old, and I heard on the radio that Toys R Us has gone bankrupt. And it got a lot of nostalgic feeling back to me, because the same 12-year-old a few years back used to ask me to stop on his way back from school. Can we stop at Toys R Us? And I knew better, right? So I said, no, we're going home. And he's like, no, I just want to look. I knew better. So it was, depending on who negotiated harder, we either stopped or went home. For the last 3 years, he hasn't been asking. And with this news that came through, it triggered this thought that why did he stop? It's because he discovered Amazon. He discovered VAT-19 online. And all he can use his own time to put things in my shopping cart and then wait for me to sign in and just pay with my plastic card. That's how easy it has become for him to get what he wants. And that, to me, it was like, that's why Toys R Us are bankrupt today. So it's because of these transient advantage that we have. Every single business in this scenario where it's a world of transient advantages. And unless the adaptation happens quickly, unless the business environment response to the business environment happens quickly, it can severely impact the life of the business and the longevity of the business and the competitive advantage, even market relevance. So it's beyond just customer delight. It's the very survival that requires quick adaptations. That is why we have Agile. So there are some of the things that you see here are from the version 1 report. Thousands and thousands of organizations have responded. Only 20% of those are actually version 1 clients. So this really gives a good view of why people are going for Agile. So accelerated product delivery. Again, this ties in to how quickly one can respond to what is needed by the customers and how to delight customers. Does anybody here have any other reason why they're going for Agile? Can anyone volunteer why you're going Agile in your organization? Yes,
Cross-functional collaboration.
very good. So something like business IT alignment is one of the reasons why we have cross-functional collaboration very much needed.
Root cause identification as well seems to help.
Yes, throws out and exposes all the real reasons that are causing problems and delays. Anyone else? Make decisions faster. So decentralized decision making, one of the core tenets for Agile, again, for reduction of delays. The more you centralize, the more you bottleneck, and the more it takes time. I'm going to move on to a little bit of history. And this is to answer the question, what is Agile? So it's, while doing this particular slide, I just looked at it amazed because it's nearly half a century that these practices have been around some way or the other. And prior to that, even, there was lean in manufacturing. It took some time for the software industry to get it ingrained in our practices. But here we are. We started off long back with the PDSA and DSDM, and the Scrum started pretty long back, 1986. And then you have RAD, FDDs, Crystal, so on and so forth. But then a stake in the ground was put in 2001. That's when the proponents of this lightweight development methods got together and developed the manifesto. So for all of us, we say that that is what Agile is. There's nothing else that says what is Agile. It's the manifesto and the 12 principles. So, but all these lightweight approaches that we have some core ideologies, and those are fast iterative delivery, quick feedback, self-managed teams, and continuous testing built into all of it. So frequency, short, tight cycles, and quick feedback. Those are there in every single one of these methodologies that we have today. So again, continuing with the what is Agile, today it's a combination of many different lightweight practices. What you see on the left here are those that apply to teams: Scrum, Kanban, lean software development, continuous integration, continuous delivery. All of these apply to discrete teams and projects. When you go on the right-hand side, Scrum of Scrum, Scrum at scale, large-scale Scrum, SAFe, so on and so forth, these are all the frameworks and methods and practices that you have which help expand Agile to more than one team. So because you cannot really, in today's world, most of the large organizations, you cannot deliver a product using one single team. You have complex programs, you have dependencies, and that is the reason why the framework and methods on the right came into the picture and is becoming more and more popular every day. And that is why we have the consulting business on, right? So there is a very interesting video on YouTube that I saw the other day, which talks about what is Scrum. Just try asking it to the paper company which creates those little sticky notes, and you'll get one version of what is Agile. Ask us, the process consultants, we'll have another version. So, and it's okay, because that's what Agile is. It's flexible and adaptive. So going on to starting from where we went, this is where the entire life cycle used to look like, starting from business with requirements, and then coding, building, integration, testing, release, deploying, and on to ops. So when we come to Agile development, towards the beginning, it covered this much of the life cycle altogether. Then came continuous integration, because you keep adding on to the main product before it becomes ready for release. Continuous delivery, when you actually make it release ready. Deployment, when you get to a point where the developer who's making changes at the click of a button can put it in production. Most of the organizations that we are working with are not here yet. We are still in the process of agile development, continuous integration, and on our way to continuous delivery and deployment. That's where DevOps is. So let me share a little story about this organization that we are working with. It was 5 years back that they started their agile journey with training and team coaching and adopting Scrum and Kanban, so on and so forth. 2 years later, they realized they're not getting the business value as much as they thought they would. So what was wrong? So while we sat down with them, we spoke to a number of stakeholders and found that it's a problem of scaling. And then it's also the automation for the life cycle hasn't happened well enough. So let's go DevOps. Let's do DevOps. We started on that. It's been about 2 years. So it's from a cycle time of about 77 days from build to release ready code. Within a few months, they got it down to 12 days by reducing the delays in between. Now they're moving on to reducing it to a few days. Well, the target is to reduce it to a few minutes and then do several releases every day. So for those that are technology-born companies, like the Amazons, the Googles, and the Ubers, this comes easy for them because it's technology-oriented. For the larger organizations that are more reliant on businesses to provide requirements, and it's harder. And again, I think it's the collaboration and then the decision-making which stands in the way. In this company that we are working for, the technology exists already now. If the developer wants, he can put it into production as soon as he's done. But then we do have those balances and checks for people to come in and see, is this really going into production? Is ops ready to take it on? Is marketing ready to consume the feedback that's coming from the market, so on and so forth. So it's a journey, and it will continue, God knows till when, maybe several seconds, and you have code out in production. So there are some balances that are being worked out in DevOps with this client of ours, which is that if these changes, and these are all small changes that are put out there every day, right? That's how you get the frequency in changes. If it does not impact the end user, let the developer put it out there, because it's already been tested. And if it does impact the user, then let's wait. So it's more a balancing that's being done as to what goes into deployment continuously and what needs more checks and more reviews and evaluations. We are looking into a future where we have analytics built in so that it becomes a self-serving process where machine learning, automation, and self-healing is happening automatically. And that's the future that we are looking at. And to do all this, we need cloud. You cannot do DevOps without cloud, because for the developer to get tests done so quickly, so frequently, we need those environments in seconds. We need those environments created on demand, and that can only happen when you have cloud. How are you doing so far? I cannot see a lot of people back there. So, are you okay? Okay. Anytime you have a question, please ask. I can't. There's a block here. Okay. But I'll try and go back there and see how you're doing. So coming to the next one, and this time I do need some participation from you. So myths and truths. Agile allows you to deliver the same features and functionality faster. What do you think? Is it a myth or a truth? It is a myth. It does not really allow you to deliver the same features and functionality faster. It breaks it up into smaller pieces, so you get feedback faster. So it really depends on how you ask this question. So next one. Agile doesn't give predictability of programs. Myth or truth? How many for myth? So it depends on how you ask again. You could say it's true if you're looking out or trying to predict 2 or 3 years down the line for some programs. It does give a lot more predictability compared to traditional ways if you're looking at it in a nearer term. Because with Agile, you tend to, or it says that you should address those that are most risky upfront. You know more whether the program will succeed or not because you're hitting the hardest to do things or the riskiest things earlier than later. So that's how it improves predictability, but it's not a crystal ball if you compare it with the waterfall. Next one, Agile requires more planning effort. Myth or truth? How many for true? I'm hearing some truths here. Yes, and that's right. That's so right. It requires a tremendous amount compared to other methods, a lot more planning upfront, and then at every iteration there's planning, every single iteration. So that's true. Agile encourages scope changes at any time. Myth or truth? True? How many for true? It's a myth. The operating word over here is anytime. It does not allow changes at any time. When you're in the middle of a sprint, for example, don't change scope. You can change scope in between sprints. So it allows for flexibility, but when you're within the iteration, no. Did you have a question? I see a little bit of incredulity in your face. So, are we good with this being a myth? Is it good? Okay. 5, Agile requires teams to be self-governing. How many for truth? It's a myth. Agile, one of the core principles or the core ideologies that we speak about, if I go back and show you the slide, you'll see it's self-managed. It's self-managed teams, self-organizing teams, not self-governed. So just by way of example, the mafia is a very self-managed, self-organizing concept. However, if you leave it for self-governance, then you can get the mafia too. So that is why you still need governance. You still need directions and guardrails, so on and so forth for governance. However, it needs to be flexible enough. It needs to be adaptive enough that the teams can self-manage themselves. So that's the big difference. Group support functions need not be agile. Myth or truth? Myth.
The way you're saying.
Exactly. I like that answer. There's another consultant in the room. It's always, it depends, right? So if this is towards the beginning of the journey, you want to start with the teams that are developing, perhaps. and it's harder to change everything together. And by agile, it's always small changes at a time. So you probably do not want to make changes with the support groups right up front. But down the line, when you're on the way, yes, you absolutely need support functions to understand agile, be agile, respond to the changes that need to be changed. And as we go in this discussion, you'll see how it's so important to get, especially in partnering. So with that, I'm going to come to typical challenges in outsourced agile delivery. But thank you for your participation. It was good. So typical challenges. We had a client where we had a large program with several different Scrum teams that have been set up. And it went into red within the first month, and it's expectedly a multi-year program. So we wondered why, and we couldn't really pinpoint. There were lots and lots of issues, but we didn't know how to solve all of it together to get it to green quickly. So we got or requested the product owner who was here in North America to spend some time with the Scrum teams, not just at the on-site teams, but come to India and spend a month with the team there. And within a month, things changed. The productivity of the teams dramatically improved. Morale responded, and it became so much better. It didn't get into green right away after a month. It took another month because there were many different factors. But one of the things that we found that this visit helped do was to create that shared vision. And also the collaboration that it fostered within the team. They knew who they're talking to. Sometimes there are two great nations separated by a common language. And for us, that seemed to be the case. And after that, working together, and when people met face-to-face, spent some time together, there seems to lift a lot of the language barrier that existed, even though it was a common language. Now, there was another story that I really liked about this. One of my colleagues used to work for NASA. And one day he was working late. Coming out, he met with the man who was cleaning the floors and got to talking to him and was surprised to hear when asked that, okay, what do you like about your job here? And the janitor said, well, my mission is to put people in space. And my colleague asked, he had a face that didn't disbelieving and said, yeah, if somebody falls over here, it might put, delays into the program. And that's what I do. I keep everything shipshape so that people don't trip and fall, clean the floors, and help put people in space. That's shared vision. And sometimes when you partner, or even whether you partner or not, teams that are working, if they don't have the vision as to whatever they're building, the building block they have, whether it's making the cathedral or whether it's making a big skyscraper, they don't put into the block what they would if they knew. So it's one of the primary things that we have that brings in alignment, that brings in collaboration. Now, all the things that you see here on this slide, we've built it out over years. Is this from one single organization, one single partnership? No. This is across many different programs, many different clients that we have worked with over the years. But are these really problems with agile delivery? If you look at it, shared vision, information exchange, operating model, support system, management methods, collaboration, wouldn't these be required whether you do agile or not? So that's what we are finding today. That you try to do something and sometimes you say, agile will solve it. It's not a silver bullet. So once we look into it and peel the onion a little bit, we say, this is not a problem with Agile. This is, it needs to be done anyways, whether you do Agile or not. So, but there are certain challenges which are there because you are doing Agile. We are doing Agile with our partners. One of them is the role understanding. So before I started on my really long trip to Toronto, I got a message from one of my colleagues in the UK. And he said, I'm really down today because I'm seeing one of the large programs that I've been working with very hard crumble. And I asked him why. And he texted back saying that I think I'll need to give some very hard feedback because it's because of the erratic behavior of the product owner. So I was getting into a fly, said, okay, go do the right thing, right? So it's a matter of both awareness of what the role is and also playing it right. And that can make or break the entire program and team. And the role of the product owner is very, 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 very important. It can make or break it. It's a huge responsibility because it helps the team get direction. It helps the team proceed, prioritize. They don't know what to do. And what they're doing, is it of value or not, is determined by the product owner. So it's a lot of it has to do with learning what the role is and playing it right. Scrum Masters. So here's another story that I heard. We have one of our very senior consultants, part of a transformation engagement with a travel and hospitality organization. And some of the things that he's seeing, we have teams in India, many different Scrum teams, and some problems that he is facing. The Scrum Master is really a tech lead. Teams are taking sometimes 2 weeks to deliver one single story. Not acceptable, right? Teams are silent during stand-ups or retrospectives. There's something going there because you need people empowered. They should be speaking up. What's happening over here? The Scrum Master is assigning work to the team. They're not picking it up themselves. So again, these are challenges that you see, and this is because of the awareness and the role-playing that's happening, which is specific to Agile, which in a program or project management kind of a scenario where you have a project manager giving out tasks to people, it wouldn't have been there. But with Agile, you need different behavior, different ways of working. So again, these challenges are things that we found are really that you need to take care of when you're doing Agile. A definition of done, engineering practices sometimes differ. Agile training, again, there's no dearth of training available, even in the public domains and forums. But however, it's a continuous process of learning and applying it. And documentation. There are daily status reports and weekly status report and monthly status reports still on there. And we haven't been able to get, do away with all of these. And dedicated teams. Some resources, though the people, as well as the hardware resources sometimes, you don't have dedicatedly available to the program or project, and that causes problems. With Agile, you need that. Okay. Any questions so far? Any specific topic? Yes.
Thumbs up. Good.
Thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Any topic that you would want us to discuss a little more?
I think there's a wider challenge though specifically around the supply chain. So once you're in a relationship with a vendor and you're doing something, you're already underway. But there's a supply chain restructure that has to happen. What we're struggling with is trying to figure out how we can stop treating our supply chain the way that we've been treating it the last 20 years, where we just buy things and then do things with it, to transforming that to we're buying capabilities from somebody. right? So it's less about, here's a project, here's $10 million, I need you to build this thing, here's the specifications, come back to me when it's finished. It's more about we're buying capabilities to build the thing. And actually beyond that, we've got to start, one of the other challenges we're having is we're stuck on like this way of thinking where we go, I need to buy a system that produces prices for trades, just as a simple example. When actually what I need is just prices for trades, right? So what I need is I need to maybe restructure the way I'm thinking about my supply chain to find a vendor that can just give me prices on trades, rather than please build me a system that I can then run to give me prices on trades. Because I don't actually want the system. I don't care about the system. I just care about the prices. Mm-hmm. So there's an aspect just above all of this consideration around engineering into the business and commercial side of it to say, are we actually buying the right goods and services for our company?
Right. And I think there's a little bit of learning curve there as well as to this new way of working. The suppliers have been used to getting specifications and building it out. Whereas with Agile, they actually have to interact a lot more and frequently, and sometimes they're not used to it. They have to get used to it. Similarly, for the customers, they cannot do the specifications right up front because they don't know enough about it, right? Even if, when we go to a tailor and ask for a dress to be made, sometimes we don't know exactly what we want, trying it out and then, fitting it, and then it evolves into what's required. Imagine a big program with lots of details and specifications. How do you get that all down without even knowing what it's going to be? And the requirements change. So I think I see your point around the difference between the, looking for capabilities versus this is what you need as a product. So what we are seeing a shift in is customers asking for capabilities, teams with those capabilities rather than give me this product. That's the shift that we are seeing more and more today. So, and it's not an easy change for anyone to do, the suppliers or the customers. And that brings me a little, I want to spend a little time on the support groups, finance, legal, procurement departments, how it's so important for them to adapt to this new way of working, because they expect to see things written down in the contract. And I'm going to share a story of how we are doing it differently and what it needs to do it differently. So I get a lot of questions on, does this distributed agile thing really work? And it does tie in quite a bit with the partnership model. But even otherwise, distributed teams are here. They are even some of our very large clients have global teams that need to work together, and they're doing agile. Again, a reference from the report from the industry says that 86% of respondents had at least some distributed teams. And from TCS, from the several hundreds of agile projects and programs that we are delivering, 84% of them are with distributed teams. So it's pretty much seems that there's a commonality here. So we went and interviewed some of our large clients, very large insurance company, and a bank with whom we have distributed teams globally spread out, near shore, offshore, several locations in North America, and we asked our clients, why are you doing distributed agile? What's in it for you? And what you see in the bottom of the slide is the answers that we got from our clients. The ability to scale quickly per business demand, because the volume of transactions, the volume of changes and the work, not possible without getting all these teams working together. Higher value to business. So they already had the distributed team set up. They already had outsourced. They already had all these, setups everywhere. Some of our clients have captives in other locations in the world. So they did it because of value. And to suddenly change over and get everybody co-located in one place is just not an option. So they're flexing it to do Agile with these teams everywhere. So again, for value delivery to business, higher throughput, because it's, you get 24 hours instead of 8 hours of work. Well, not 24, maybe 16, but still better than 8. And out of those 8, you get productive work for only about 5 hours, maybe, right? So it's the overall how much productive time you get during your entire day. And of course, improved operations coverage. You have a problem, people have gone home here, you still have some other teams taking care of things from another part of the world. So these are the reasons why there is distribution. But we are facing problems, pretty significant problems with Agile and distributed teams. Overlap time, so time zone differences is not making it easy. And depending on which time zones are being covered, it's harder or easier to do. Because that overlap time, if you have the product owner in one place and the Scrum teams in another place, is required daily. And there's no easy answer to that. Lower productivity of teams. Sometimes it's a perception. Sometimes it's really so. But the question you ask when you do Agile, instead of just saying it's not working, is why? And that is the big change. Why is the team not productive? And oftentimes we find that the answer lies in somewhere else. Something else needs to be addressed. So that's why we say the perceived lower productivity of teams. Inconsistent engineering practices is another. Difficult to engage and motivate teams. We shared some, about the travel and hospitality program that we are having. The teams are not speaking up in daily stand-ups or retrospectives. What's going on over here? So there are some real challenges. Additional effort required to synchronize teams. Yes, it is required. If you had everybody sitting in one place and talking together, working together, would productivity be better? Yes, of course. But it's a sliding scale of how much you invest and how much you get out of it. So it's not as good as having everybody in the same team. Neither is it as bad as everybody working on their own. So there is a balance over here, and we need to figure out where to hit the balance. So there is no easy answer, and there is no one, if anyone tells you that having distributed teams is as good and as productive as having co-located teams, they're not saying the right thing. It's not as productive, but then it's a sliding scale. Okay, so anyone wants to any experiences that people have had with distributed teams and Agile? No?
Sure.
Yes.
I used to work at, excuse me, I used to work at Canada Post, and the teams were split between Toronto and Ottawa, so there was no time zone challenge, but the lack of co-location for the teams when they were forming was pretty challenging. But they used technology in the form of an always-on video screen that was at the end of the table in each room, that when the teams started to gel, it created this virtual table that spanned the two locations, and it wound up being very, very effective.
Thank you. Because that is one of the things that we've found. And let me go to the next slide. Because we've been doing this for a while now, we've come up with all these models and things, and we landed with 4 of them, which is that the entire team, one Scrum team, is in one place at on-site. Then we have another scenario, another model that is where we have multiple teams, but the product owner is in one place, and the other team does not have a product owner, so it requires overlap time. Then we have multi-location, where you have several teams, Scrum teams, and the product owner sitting with one team in one location. And then we have the location independent agile. For us right now, that's nirvana. Maybe 1 year later it's going to look different. But where we have a single product owner, he or she can be in any location, but you needs product specialist with every different team for doing that. So this scenario is specific to when you do have product specialists. When you don't have it, then one of the other models would be applicable. But pretty much for each one of them, what you said about some investment being made in collaboration, the technology already exists. We have all the teams that are doing distributed agile and doing it well have significant investment being done on collaboration and technology-enabled collaboration tools. So that's pretty much ubiquitous in all the distributed agile models that we have. So the thing that with all these models is, and we think that the most advanced would be the location-independent agile. It requires all of these. Dedicated teams are required. It's not that you're splitting one single Scrum team across multiple locations. That does not work. You need the Scrum team together co-located in one place. But you can have multiple Scrum teams spread across different places. So that's the thing that we arrived at. There can be the backlogs. How do you work with the backlogs? There can be one single backlog that is being used by the different teams, or one single backlog at the top level with separate backlogs for every Scrum team being created. That's another model. Again, development clock per day. Although it says over here 8 hours, we all know that 8 hours is hardly the productive time that people put in. It's maybe 5 hours if we are good. But the thing is that there are these practices, the investments, the enablement that are required for it to work. Otherwise, it won't. And the question to ask always when it's not working is why? Why is it not working? And then fixing that. Okay. Now coming to partnering, and here do we have any questions? Yes?
I think you might have covered part of this, but if you did, it didn't quite go in, so it might be my fault. By the way, great presentation. I love the way you're dealing with this. So you said there's prerequisites for an Agile program to work. Have you found that implementing Agile is a way to catalyze upstream process changes? Or are those upstream process changes prerequisite for an Agile program to work? Have you successfully driven upstream purchasing and HR and those policy and procedure changes? Have you used Agile to get those done, or are you frustrated by them? I know the answer is yes, but talk about that.
Sure. So I'm going to go back and draw on the two examples. One of them is the example I spoke about, the large insurance company where we are doing Agile and DevOps. So it's more of an evolution rather than a transformation. But there we've got to a stage where we are sort of counseling the leadership to make changes in how they react, how they behave, how they behave not in a derogatory sense of the word, but it's changing their approach to interacting with people. And that leadership layer covers not just IT. It covers HR. It includes people from finance, legal, procurement. So the whole layer. Why is that? It's because if they sit down, and one of the things we do there is to have a lab set up. There is a lab set up for people to come and try out this entire life cycle and do it once. I was in a conference at one time where I met with a VP from Starbucks, and she showed me this little video where for 2 weeks she was at a Starbucks counter selling coffee, making the coffee and selling it to customers. That way she exactly knew where it's going, how it is going, and how she, as an IT person, needs to enable that. and how exactly it's enabling. So we have those leaders come and try this entire software development lifecycle, sometimes even agreeing to write a Hello World program and put it out there to see how it is done and how it matters what they are doing to this lifecycle. So to answer your question, most of the time it's very frustrating. But it's a journey. And even in the travel and hospitality, the other example that we have, contract is coming up. How do we need to change? Because now the contracts need to change. Legal needs to understand that these are the changes expected. When we sat down and did the contract for the insurance customer, we'd already done the roadmap, the 2 or 3 year roadmap that we wanted, and we did it together with them. And when it came time for contract, we just said, okay, how much budget do you have? Okay, we need, with this budget for a year, you have visibility for the budget for a year, we can have only 5 people, and we'll make do with that and do whatever we can with that. So the contract is 2 pages. But then, because the feedback cycle, because whatever we are doing, we are doing it together with the client, there's never any question as to, what value is it, because they're seeing it happen.
I don't want to hide the questions, but very well answered. Have you ever been paid for the upstream coaching that is sometimes required to make Agile work?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Because where it is being seen, the coaching itself is, it's boxed, time boxed. When we go and say, okay, we will do coaching, we time box it. And it's usually more than 6 months period. So depending on who we are coaching, how many people, how many department, we'd say that, yeah, we are getting paid for it. I didn't quite understand why that should be.
We've never been paid for it. We never come close. Well, I guess we've come close. Most of the time, when there's internal client issues that are frustrating our IT group, we're the enemy. And there's a little bit of, who on earth are you to say that we have to change our process to make this work? Now,
Yes.
I'm not Tata, but nonetheless, swimming upstream for us is almost impossible. And we run. We've learned that we seem to be unable to affect broader process change in our clients, and I'd love to learn how you guys do it so I can do it again.
It's not easy. It's not easy. When we, maybe sometime later, I will share with you our the view that we have for enterprise agility. And it covers the great deal of that is driving collaboration and organization change management. And right up front, when we work with our clients, on day one, we tell them, you will need to do all of this. Now, it will not happen. The change is not going to happen without all of this. But if there are some specifics out of these 8 or 10 elements of enterprise agility, if there are some specific areas that you want to handle, and the rest you want us to handle, let's work with that. Let's start with that. But all of these need to be addressed. And one of is, so it's a little bit of expectation setting, a lot of it. And even, to be honest, within TCS, we are undergoing change as well. We are working with our clients, but when we are advising our clients on this, that doesn't mean we have changed. So we see this, the dichotomy, and it's always very interesting, and we have very interesting conversations in our practice because we have the experts, and they say, why is TCS not doing this? Well, we are going through a transformation also. We are going through an evolution also. Let's be calm and take deep breaths. So I think we are running out of time, but very quickly, for the contract changes, and it's a pretty much a paradigm shift where we have moving from predictive approaches to adaptive approaches. So what gets fixed is not scope, as in traditional models. What gets fixed is cost and time, and the scope is left variable. This is sometimes very, very hard for people to grasp, especially procurement departments and legal. So again, We are working with them. One quick example of, we have a very large customer in the US where I asked them, okay, you guys are seeming to be doing Agile very well, and you have these fixed price contracts. What's going on? It doesn't make sense to me. So they said, sometimes we know these systems so well, we know it better than our clients, so we sign up for the fixed price deals, and they're usually small project deals. They're not doing very large contracts anymore. But then they say, sometimes we fall short. But because the client trusts us, they know that we've tried everything we can to deliver, and we fell short. So they don't make a big deal out of it. And sometimes when we can, we over-deliver. We go beyond the scope and say, okay, we are done. What else do you want us to do? The operative word over here is trust. If you have that, everything else is good. I'm not going to go into the details of different types of contracts. You have them. But pretty much where there is a new relationship or unknown areas to be worked on, we go, I think, for both parties, the customers and the suppliers, simple time and material or capped time and material is the way to go, with fixed price being when you know the systems very well and you know what you're getting in for.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
One of the purposes of Agile is to deliver that.
Yes.
So in your contract, do you have anything that is example, if I hit the market, I get the if I'm having a time to market, I get a market share of X percentage. So you get as a partner to get me to the time to market. If you get it earlier, then we get X percentage plus something. If you get later, then you lose something. You have that kind of contract.
We are getting there. I won't say that that has become ubiquitous yet, but some of our clients are asking for it, and we are also trying to figure out, with all the unknowns in place, how to make it work and make it a win-win situation. So yes, the trend is towards that, to make that happen. But are we there yet? No. It's work in progress. But that is where things are headed. So pretty much, again, going back to one of the manifestos, collaboration over contract negotiation is winning every time. And vision, common vision, trust, and quick feedback. That's what's making it work. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I like to jot down notes during presentations, and I think the most important part is for anyone else who went 0 for 6 on the myths versus truth test like I did, Apala said there are different definitions for Agile, so I think I actually went 6 and 0 and not 0 for 6. Then, as Core always does, on our panels, we bring with us a provider, a buyer, and an advisor. We want to make sure everyone has a full perspective, because sometimes the same question, you'll get a different answer from the provider as you will from the buyer or the advisor. So joining from the provider side, of course, Apala Mukherjee, fantastic presentation this morning. Thank you so much. Joining her today from the buyer side, Indy Erdely from CIBC. Thank you for joining today. I spoke to Indy before, and I think she's worked in every avenue of technology at CIBC over the past 27 years, but currently runs the Agile Delivery Center of Excellence at CIBC. And on the advisor side, we have Mark Lade. Mark Lade's the associate partner with Everest Group and is the lead for Canada. And fun story, in my previous lifetime, Mark was my boss for 5 years, so it's great to have Mark here. And I want to pass it off to George. Thanks, George.
Great to see so many of you out today, though I knew it would be a good topic to get people out. Like Rushi, I actually keep little notes, and Apala, that was a great presentation. I just want to highlight 3 of my circled notes. When you said, oh, this client's doing several releases a day, my sphincter muscle started twitching a little bit. But then you did give us more detail that was more internal IT stuff, but the user-facing stuff took a little bit longer. I'm now building into my McCarthy template contract the mafia clause, because I thought doing that comparison to how mafia governs and so on, I thought was very, very good. And finally, particularly in this day and age of fake news and alternative facts, Apollo, you've given me a great line when someone is not being quite truthful and perhaps even lying. The phrase is, well, they're not saying the right thing. So, Apollo, I've picked up a value add here this morning that I'm very, very grateful to you. So let's just kick it right off and turn to Indy, and obviously at a major financial institution. How did that resonate for you in terms of Apollo's presentation, and specifically, without all the secret sauce, what are you doing at CIBC that's along this agile line, and what's working and perhaps what's not working?
So back to you're not saying the right thing. One of my job is to politely correct my boss and his boss and the executive team about what is the right thing and what's not the right thing and how to say it. So that's been, I'll keep that in mind now, use that line, that's not the right thing to say. We started our journey at CIBC really started about 2 years ago, and we started with piloting Agile. We thought we should just test it out and understand what it's all about. It's only been in the last year or so that we've really made some progress in terms of more transformational, where we're actually dealing with some of our upstream process teams to say, you have all of these processes that supports very waterfall type of delivery. How do we change it now to support an agile way of doing work? So we've actually started engaging with all of our process teams, identifying which ones are the high priority, which one are the most critical that the teams are all encountering with getting work done and with implementing Agile. One of the other things that we're focusing on is the people change management. The change starts with you. If you're going to be adopting Agile, you have to look at yourself first and say, what do I need to do as an individual to start behaving in a different way before I can start looking to change other people? So I went through a transformation as I was starting this job, and then I started working with the individuals across the organization to help them with understanding what Agile is, why it's important to do it, and what they need to do in terms of their deliverables and their way of working to adopt a different way of working. So we've got about 50 plus teams that have started to adopt Agile. They're in various stages of maturity. Some of them are very new, some of them are more advanced. We've started working on DevOps as well. We've mostly in this continuous integration, some teams into continuous delivery, but we're not doing continuous deployment because we do have a lot of very rigorous processes that we do have to adhere to before we can move something into our production environment. So our journey has been primarily in the last year, been progressing very slowly, but we've seen a lot of ramp up in this year, and also with our executive team, we've actually put them through some Agile training to say, what is it? How do teams work in an Agile way? And they all walked away with a better understanding of what it is to be Agile, because they talk about it, but they don't necessarily understand what it is and how to behave in an Agile way. So those are some of the things that we've been doing in the last year to help our Agile journey.
And maybe, Mark, just as a segue from that, when you folks come in and help bring along an organization, particularly in financial services, but others as well, are there particular touchstones that you folks focus on that you see requires some work and some coaching? Because I think Apollo's message was it takes two to tango to make this happen. And
Yeah.
What have you found in Toronto?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd have to begin by saying Indy's story is a pretty common story. When we think of what the market is doing, there's just this very rapid adoption of Agile and people trying to figure out how they're going to use Agile, where they're going to use it, and how to scale it. So very, very common question. By the way, what Ever's Group does for a living is strategy work. It does sourcing advisory, and it also publishes research on the global services industry, including IT. And so it's kind of that 360 view that helps us when we go in and talk to a client to give them a full perspective of what they're going to need to be thinking about. So let me kind of shed light on a few things. So the first thing we would typically begin talking about is that there's been a dramatic change in the entire sourcing industry, the global services industry over the last few years. And to give you kind of a sense of things, that global service industry we know was kind of growing in double digits for a number of years. And about early 2016, it started to wane to 4.5%, and then beginning of this year, 2.1%, and it's kind of growing, predicting for the next couple of years, slightly less than 2%. That's creating some really interesting dynamics, as you could imagine, in the marketplace. And when we really start to unpack that, 2.8% shrinkage in the traditional labor arbitrage space and 20% growth in the digital space. And as we heard about today, digital and agile and DevOps are that basic underpinning to digital and the pace of digital. So that's kind of changed the whole discussion, the whole negotiating power and the nature of the dialogue between service providers and their clients. And we see complete volume flexibility in deals. We see no or very low termination fees. We see outcome-based pricing. That question was asked. In other words, we're seeing all the attributes that Agile and what makes Agile work well. We're seeing those over and over again. So that's kind of the first point. The second point is be very, very sensitive of trying to put lipstick on the traditional waterfall method when you think about how you're going to try to work with partners in order to do Agile. If you try to, not only are you going to kind of materially diminish the value you create, there's a good chance you're actually going to set yourself up for outright failure, because expectations are so misaligned, processes and methodologies are so misaligned. So the sourcing process itself then kind of takes on a different life, right? This discussion about trust that we talked about. You did a great job talking about trust. And Paula, you did a great job talking about trust. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be built on a well-written contract. Sorry, George. It's not going to be built on a well-written contract. And so the sourcing process and the sourcing activity is really all about finding that right partner. And it's about defining the mechanisms that are going to embody the collaboration, the transparency, and the trust that Agile depends on. And that's very different. There was a question asked earlier, I don't see the gentleman now, about the supply chain, right? He's asking about the supply chain. Well, this is about getting away from that micromanagement model that hurt so many sourcing relationships. Yeah. And that was in the traditional sense, but based on what you heard today, you can see it would absolutely destroy it in the Agile sense. You've now got a team that has to work as an intimate unit between client and provider on a daily basis. Brings you to the team design issue we talk to our clients about. So just imagine the factory model that the outsourcing and labor arbitrage industry has been built on, of a large pyramid with lots of junior resources and pools of resources that are fungible and move from minute by minute almost between clients and between projects. That just simply can't work. Persistent teams are essential. The embedded learning over the life of a product is key. And that's true inside your organization, and it's true between you and a provider. That persistency is key. Brings you kind of that product mindset. That's a different skill set when you start talking about product mindset. You now need IT people who think like business people. You need very senior IT people who have seen problems before and know how to predict and solve those problems and won't get caught in the trap of those problems. And so that persistent team has to last over time. And kind of ties into a technology version of that is the more of that stack that you can collapse, the more automation you can build, the quicker you can get to the DevOps end of that curve. And so everybody's trying to hard collapse the stack. Well, just imagine what that means to your traditional internal IT organization that you built as a IT shared service with deep siloed skills in engineering and network and DBA and et cetera, right? Suddenly those start to break down in this model. So your own IT organization needs to change. Accelerators are key, microservices layer on your legacy code. But also the accelerators that any provider is going to bring to the table are a key criteria. And then finally contracting. It's kind of fundamentally different, right? When you think of it in the waterfall, fixed price, fixed scope contract world, your contract really was all about protecting you from, the long delays, long payment cycles, change-related risk. You don't find out if you've got a working system until the end. What if the project stops early? How big is the impact to my organization? And you can take every one of those, you translate that into contract terms, right? Well, in an Agile world, it's shorter iterations of working code. It's direct business involvement. It avoids long delays in the feedback cycle. It facilitates short payment cycles of usable product. It minimizes liability risk because you're getting code out and seeing it function. And if it's going to impact something, you're going to find out quite a bit sooner, and you can do it in a limited pilot mode because it's actually working code at that point. So it changes a whole bunch of dimensions. And so if you can embody Agile methods right into your relationship and into your agreement, in fact, you accentuate the client interests and you minimize risk. And so it does then impact the contract. And then the final thing we end up talking about commonly is that this is a journey. Paula talked about it, Indy talked about it, it's a journey. There's the extreme examples that help us understand the potential, like when you think of Google and Amazon and Microsoft for that matter, et cetera. Embracing fully, and they're getting kind of 10 times gains by doing it. But the reality is it takes time. And we had a discussion earlier, right? You do it slow and low and kind of come in that way. I wouldn't be fearful of starting an initiative and even an agreement with a partner that starts with feeling awful much like a fixed price, fixed scope kind of mindset, but delivered through Agile capabilities, earn the trust, earn the creds. And as people understand it, as you educate it, et cetera, you can change that and be prepared to change that.
Can I just maybe drill down to all three of you? And I'm going to use an analogy that, Apollo, you used, which is you're going to your tailor and you need an item of clothing. And let's use a wedding dress as an example. And to Mark's point and your point about waterfall being, early on in the specifications, we figure out exactly what the wedding dress is supposed to look like. Are the shoulders puffy or not? The veil, So how have all three of you seen this solved? So fine, we start by not defining specifically the dress, but we don't want to end up with a yoga workout outfit either. And we do have a budget, at least for this particular wedding, and the date is coming, and you've got to be a wow showing that night. So, Paula, maybe, because you started with the analogy, which I liked, where have you seen clients come to in terms of the right mix at the start?
So I think it was just yesterday I was on a call with a client, and They were looking for a partner to help them on their Agile journey. And one of the things he mentioned was, I want to, yes, we are going to start doing this. We have already, but I don't think we are doing it right. And I want to not just do it as evolution. I want to treat this as a transformation and do it that way. I said, okay. And I want to do it in an agile way. And I was thrilled to hear that, because in our own programs, when we work with clients, we say, okay, this is what your overall vision looks like. That's one of the first things that we do. So is it going to be a yoga work outfit, or is it going to be a wedding dress? That's the vision that we set. And then a little bit more. How does we don't get into the details of the sleeves and the veil and so on and so forth. But is there going to be a veil? Is there going to be a sleeve? Maybe that's the very high level visioning that we do up front for any work that needs to be done in Agile, and stop there. Drawing it back to the contracting and so on and so forth, and you had asked, where are we seeing upstream for the travel and hospitality? They're going like, okay, we are doing that, the teams are agile, we want to retain them, but our budgeting is still traditional. We do it yearly. That needs to change. So now it's down to 6 months of budgeting at a portfolio level, very top down, not getting down into details anymore, which is, okay, these are the 3 or 5 value streams we are going to prioritize this year. This is how much budget we have, and it's the VPs who sit in the room along with business, the IT VPs and the business VPs sit and decide which are the top 5 value streams they're going to budget for that year and focus their energies on that. That is for the discretionary spend. The ops spend is still, it needs to be done. So those are some of the changes that we are seeing as to how the decision making at any level is at the vision strategy level, with the details being left to the downstream, and it's decentralized. So that, yeah.
Indy, at CIBC, on some of your early Agile projects?
So a wedding dress, when you design it, might look really, really good on a piece of paper. So when you actually try it on, it might not be exactly what you had envisioned it being. So starting out with a goal, saying I need a wedding dress by a certain time with this budget in mind, and then working with my seamstress to create that wedding dress with those goals and that objective in mind, is how we should be looking at software delivery as well. We have a goal, we know where we want to go, what we want to deliver, and by when and how much money we have. How we get there is up to the team and the product owner to be able to say, these are my high value requirements that I need to have delivered, and I want to have them delivered first because they would bring the most value to me as a client. They're the most complex to deliver from a technology perspective because they may require integration, they may require some complex data analysis to be done. So depending on the complexity of the requirements, the value it's bringing to the business, we can start tackling those first, and we can show as we're going through the process, for each iteration, that we're making progress. Our product owner can pivot at any given time. So this is the mindset that we're trying to instill with the teams, is knowing what we want and what we need when we need it and how much money we have, and then working with the product owner, with the teams, to decide how we're going to get there and what we work on first. And the supporting teams, like our security advisors, our risk assessment folks, we're working with them to get engaged early on in the process so that they can assess risk. They can and inform or help the project team to start addressing those risks, as opposed to waiting prior to 2 weeks or a month before implementation to do a risk assessment to make a determination whether or not it's ready to go into production. So engaging the risk assessment folks, our gating and change management teams early in the process to understand what we're building and how we're doing it reduces the complexity and the risk of waiting towards the latter part of the project delivery lifecycle to doing it. So that's what we're working on at CIBC, and that's what we're trying to get the the teams, the Agile teams to focus on, but also the supporting teams as well that helps them to reach their goals. And hopefully by then we'll have a dress that we all like.
Mark, a good example in your experience recently of a client engagement where the visioning, to Paula's phrase at the front end, was good enough, and then Agile came in and filled in the blanks and came within a budget that was originally contemplated.
Yeah, like I'd say, first of all, it's a misnomer that there's no planning and no concept of what you're actually going to be building, right? Like that, the idea that you're just going to go and start building stuff from scratch and not knowing where you're headed, that really isn't Agile. You do start with a product backlog, right? You build that first. You do have a vision of where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. Then you get really prioritized between complexity and business value, not IT value, but business value created, which things you're going to do in which order. And the key is you stop when you're happy. So can you meet that budget target? Yes, you can. You stop when you get sufficient functionality and sufficient business value, and maybe you discover along the way that actually you're delivering more value than you anticipated, and I can increase my budget, right? So yeah, I think it's kind of a misnomer, and whenever we work with people, it's gaining that experience, Indy, right? Like actually, people actually seeing that play out is critical for them to be confident that this is how it works. And
yeah, there's a lot of initial mistrust. Like, is this really going to work when you're starting out? But by the end of it, and after the teams have actually gone through the experience, the feedback is that it actually does work, and it's a better way of delivering projects.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just opening it up, questions from the floor. There were a couple of good ones before the break, the Canada Post example, the virtual meeting space. Other successes that people can just quickly point to, or there were some failures? They don't have to be yours. They can be a friend of yours who told you about some situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering when companies are starting to get into Agile, have an Agile team kind of separated from everybody else in the company. How does that compare to, let's have the waterfall people are working waterfall, Agile working in Agile, but that kind of total one way better than the other.
All three of you quickly, but maybe Paula, if you want to kick it off.
So that's usually how a very risk-averse company would go about it. And we used to see more of that happen than now. That was the scenario which was pretty common 5 years back, where people were still, didn't want to get their feet wet, just a toe maybe. But now we are seeing a lot of top-down, with the sponsorship being driven by the CXO levels, going that we need to go Agile and we need to get there fast. So it's changed, I think, the trend around. When we work with our clients, we say it has to be both top-down and bottoms-up. Top-down because you need all those other support functions also work with it. So these days, it's very common for us to start with, okay, we'll start training with the leadership. And that really helps, because when you have the leaders not just talk about going Agile, but actually walk the talk, it's huge. And when you have the leaders sitting down in the same room, going through a lean Agile session for 2 days along with their team, it's huge. Peter Drucker, I think, said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we see that if you have the leaders participating, well, the culture change can happen real quick. So yeah, so to your point around, doing it on the side and then seeing how it happens, I think that's changing very fast now.
I would agree with Paula. We had started out with removing the teams and incubating them in a special location that is conducive to collaboration. But we're now shifting for a number of reasons to creating a space within their existing environment so that they can have that area to co-locate and also to have their visualization, because the teams need their Kanban boards and they need to see what they're doing, because that's Agile is all about transparency as well. So finding a space that where they can have that collaborative space within their existing environment is what we've been focusing on as well.
And the only thing I would add is, as Apollo was saying, even if you do an incubator, that doesn't mean that you keep them isolated,
Yeah.
right? You're constantly talking. You're running a major model change initiative, and you got to look at it that way, right? This isn't an experiment. This isn't a new technology I'm going to dump in. This is a different way of running your business at the end of the day. And so you're going to operate it that way. You're going to do the leadership education. You're going to share the successes of the group. They're going to be sharing with people who don't have the opportunity to participate in that, what they've learned and, the impact they're having and all those, right? So it could be an incubator, but a very, kind of obvious and open and transparent incubator that everybody's learning from them.
Not about just taking risk, as Mark said, there's a lot of planning. It's about making sure that not just the provider, but all parties and all stakeholders collaborate, understand that there is a change management to be done, and more importantly, share the successes and failures together. That's probably what my learning has been. And any comments from you folks? Do you agree?
So one of the clients that I keep referring to, the insurance client, the first time we were there, the CIO was at the kickoff for the program. And it started out with saying, well, we are going Agile and TCS is going to get us there. And we knew it's going to be a really hard climb.
So you echoed my story.
Yeah, so it's something that it has to be internalized for it to work, and it's every individual. Indy spoke about the teams having Kanban boards, and I'm like, the day I see the CIO have a Kanban board of the work that he is doing, we've succeeded. So.
Thank you.
There's a question over here, and we're just going to ask you to use the mic for the question so we get better pickup.
So in a traditional provider methodology, there's incentives for the providers to meet the buyer's requirements or deliverables. And in Agile, and I think one of you mentioned there's often low or no fees associated with it. What's really the incentive for providers to adopt Agile to meet buyer requirements?
I can answer that.
Thank you.
We have to. We have to lockstep with our clients and our buyers, and we cannot have a different culture ourselves and expect that we will be working with our clients who have adopted the Agile culture. We like to say that we are partners, and the partners need to have the same culture. Otherwise, there's no business.
Has there been examples?
Oh, I would say plenty, but the ones where we have been successful is where if the client were advanced, they invested, and it was a joint investment done because we were learning together. In some places where the client was more around, yeah, we need to go Agile and TCS is going to get us there, it's been harder. And in all cases, I would say there's one common theme where wherever the beginnings have been rocky in some cases, where contracts were being signed off for, let's say, 3 years of some work to be delivered, large scale, and the client suddenly decided, let's do it in Agile. And our relationship managers were not aware enough, or I would say, they didn't know better than to say, yep, and kept everything else the same in the contract and just said, we'll deliver in Agile. So in those cases, it has taken a while for us to get it back to where it needs to be. There, in all instances where we had true intent to make it work, we were able to work with our clients to turn it around. For example, in one of the cases that I mentioned where the client said that, yeah, we want it in Agile, and overnight we just changed the contract to we'll deliver in Agile and submitted it and got it signed off. And then, okay, how? Where are the Scrum Masters? Where are the coaches? And it took us several months to sort of get it to a place where we started doing Agile. And then I would say more months later to get it to green, where the client saw that, yes, this is what it is. And they started participating in the process by providing product owners, so on and so forth. The hardest part is to get the good product owners from business, because even with the client side, we are dealing with IT. And they don't have business yet invested in performing those roles. So we are seeing pretty much pretty much the entire spectrum of where we are struggling and also where it's working.
I can share a few other thoughts. The first is, I had already talked about it. Paula summed it up as we have to. But the reality is the market shift is unmistakable. That traditional labor arbitrage, give you people at a cheaper rate is not, it's shrinking, it's not sustainable, and it's not their future. The massive growth, the only growth that the service provider community is seeing is in digital. And digital, in the digital world, the currency becomes speed. And there isn't a single industry, from the most traditional to the most new age, that isn't feeling the pressure to adapt digital into their world. And so if the currency is speed and digital is my priority, then Agile is my mechanism to get me there. So they absolutely have to. Now, the implications to the service provider community are quite significant and go beyond just, am I willing to have very flexible terms here? And because, hey, an Agile project is most successful if you end it early. It's actually declaring success. I spent less money than I anticipated and delivered more value than I anticipated, and I'm done. That's a success. And normally that would have been, for a service provider, terrible event. And in this case, it's bragging rights, right? So beyond just that, though, there's obviously their entire team structure is built around a different model. The idea of persistent teams is a big challenge that they're going to have to work through. Retooling from traditional technology knowledge to digital knowledge, right? It isn't easy for you guys, it isn't easy for them to find enough talent fast enough in enough places to do it. They happen to be able to do it at a size and scale that the enterprise community can never do it. They have to shift from being measured and rewarded on doing excellent work to outcomes. Outcomes is all that matters. Did I deliver business value? Doing the work itself wasn't valuable. So and they're in a competitive market, so they have to do this. They have to figure it out, and they have to do it quickly, because if their competition beats them to it, guess what they get? They get the dregs of that declining labor arbitrage market, and basically don't have a future. So that's kind of the pressures around it, and the observation is, you as enterprises should expect service providers to be significantly more flexible than they've been over the last 5 years going forward, because those dynamics are at play.
So Mark, and then we'll get to another question. Do you find that you're coaching, and Indy, this is for you as well, do you find you're being coached by people like Mark that you're coaching the buy side, frankly, as a significant part of the mandate, because everything you've been describing and that we've been hearing this morning, may not overlay on a traditional large organization that easily. Empowerment can be a scary thing, and how people adapt to it and internalize it can be a variable thing. So do you folks have like an agile readiness checklist that you have to take people through before you say, yes, you're ready for Apollo, but if you don't do some of these things internally, that agile exercise might not be optimal?
So I do rely on my suppliers or my partners to help me with the coaching because they do have a lot more experience in the industry than I do. So I do look for them for advice on how we can do things within the organization. But in terms of the checklist, we do have a checklist, we do have a training curriculum, but part of our people change management is actually getting the teams to say yes, they want it. Because sometimes they go they read about Agile and they say, okay, I know how to do Agile, or we're doing our daily meetings and we're doing Agile, but that's not all it is. So part of it is getting them to want to be trained and want to be coached to be able to be better at what they're doing. And that's, part of the challenges we're having is that some of the teams believe that they can do it without help. And my job is to say, here are some guidelines or some tip sheets that we can help you with, or some coaching to help you with your journey.
Great. Okay, there's another one here.
In spirit of transparency, I've been a buyer as well as a seller, so I understand both the pain points. So I'm going to ask a question very, very quickly. 3 questions embedded, and I'll ask it very quickly. Is that at what point do we know that we start with the wedding gown, and what point do we know that we are not getting an emperor's new clothes, if you know what I mean? The second question is that we said that leaders should change and world should change for Agile to adopt. How do you drive those changes incrementally? Because one of the aspects of Agile is to show quick wins at every level. So give me some examples of from your experience. And the third question is that there are many teams at the working level say that, yeah, all those advice is fantastic, but I have pain points to live with. Do you have some models of on-demand consulting? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll try and attempt the first one, and then keep me honest. I should have taken notes. I don't have anything. The first one around at what point do we know whether it's going to be a wedding gown or the emperor's new clothes? It's with Agile, it's fail fast, and what we like to say is learn fast, which is at some point you should be able to see in very quick, maybe the first iteration, that what fabric is being used, what the cut is going to be, at least some sort of, and it needs to be something that you can wear, and that's the point. It may not be what you like, but that is something that you should get at as early as possible. So that's a given. We have a good analogy of that I like to use. Somebody's asking for a sports car, and we ask, okay, why do you need it? Well, to get from point A to point B. Well, in the first month, then we are going to give you a skateboard. It'll get you from point A to point B. It's not going to be a sports car. Next month, we are going to get you something more. It's going to look very different from your sports car. And maybe by the time we reach the year end, your sports car may not look exactly as you envisaged it, but you know right from month 1 that you'll get from point A to point B. And you keep building on that and making it improved. So that's the approach that we would take.
Apollo, I use a slightly different example than a skateboard, which kind of might scare some people.
Skateboard,
right?
bicycle.
Yeah, the one I use is, okay, so you want something to write with, so we're going to start with a pencil. Right. We'll deliver you a pencil. You can write. Oh, now we are going to add an eraser onto that pencil. Oh, cool. We'll add an eraser onto that pencil. Oh, well, actually, I want it more permanent, so I'm going to make a pen now. Okay, let's make a pen. And while all of this has been going on, the world around me has changed, and actually what I end up with is a stylus that I use with a tablet rather than what I started with, which was a pencil, right? So you had something usable. You had something usable every step along the way, but your needs evolved, and you actually ended up, instead of having designed a pencil with an eraser up at the beginning, spent a ton of dough, and finished with a pencil and an eraser at a higher cost than you anticipated, you actually got exactly what you wanted, and you got it sooner.
So there's a reason why I like to use the analogy, because the pencil still looks too close to a stylus.
There you go.
Neither of the analogy, wedding gown is already gone.
Yeah, there you go.
The thing is that
We'll talk after about
there could be unhappiness. There could be a very deep sense of frustration in the beginning. I asked for a sports car and you're giving me a skateboard. Well, it's still getting you from point A to point B. Would you like it better if I just gave you 2 wheels or 4 wheels? That's part of a car. And that's part of a sports car. I'll give you 4 sports car wheels on month 1. Would you be happy with that? And that's what waterfall or traditional models would do. It would give you 4 wheels maybe first month, then the chassis, then the body. It still wouldn't run. So you're still not able to get from point A to point B. But there is an expectation and unhappiness at the beginning that we need to get over with. So that's my reason.
That's a good reason for that analogy. That's great.
And the other thing is that you may have a sports car, but you still may have a horse pulling it because the rest of the organization hasn't changed it. So it's still not going any faster. It's still the horse pulling the race car as opposed to a horse pulling the cart before. So there are those things that come in.
It'll be the coolest looking skateboard on the street. We have time for one more question. Anybody in this quadrant over here?
Middle quadrant.
Middle quadrant.
Thank you. A friend of mine is partly responsible for an initiative in one of the financial institutions in Toronto, and they've run into some heavy sledding because it is that incubator model, and they spent a great deal of money on that, but they've discovered that the engagement of the business is lacking, and so they're retooling to address that as we speak, I believe. To bring this back to the comment that was made that the partners in the vendor-client relationship need to have that common culture, I'm wondering if the panel could speak a little bit to the need for that kind of common culture between business and IT within an organization, setting aside the question of vendor relationships.
I can take that from the bank perspective. So Agile started out in IT. And we've always said that we need the business to be engaged. And we're starting it with getting the business at the ground level with the project team, but also at the executive level, getting them educated. One of the biggest change our business partners have to go through is relinquishing control, because they need to let the product owner, that's part of the team, be able to make the decisions and not to overrule them. And we're finding that that's one of the biggest changes they have to go through. And also that person has to be senior enough to be able to make those decisions and be able to navigate the organizations, because in a large organization, the product owner needs to work with legal, marketing, compliance, AML, all the different groups to identify what needs to be built and then bring it back to the team and how to build it. So getting our business partners to agree that we need the seniority and we need that resource to be dedicated is a very different model that we have today, because generally they write business requirements, hand it over to us, but now they need to be engaged. And it's an ongoing dialogue with our business partners to get them on board with that change in model.
I can share another example for you. This happened to be a client who serves the telecom industry. and they build products that that telecom industry then uses and delivers to their client base. And so they wanted to adapt or adopt Agile. And this speaks to kind of the fact that this is a journey, it's a change, and you know, the early mistakes can hold you back long term. And so what we actually did is identified which of those telecom clients of theirs would actually embrace and get value out of much more rapid release of functionality, and which of them are living in a model in their business where they have an expectation of hitting a particular date with a particular scope at a particular cost. So to your triangle, they can only work with all three. And our client couldn't control their customer to work in one mode or another. So we found their clients that this could work with, and so the products that were being delivered to them, we then worked with the leadership team to actually orient everybody around the track record of delivering more business value faster and being able to adapt to change more flexibly, and got everybody to buy into everybody didn't understand it completely. Everybody weren't at a best practice level of execution, but they bought into the common vision and the common concept of what we were going to try to accomplish. And then that team, you know, so I'll call it an incubator, but it was an incubator that was meant to be more than an incubator. It was meant to be the path forward for a significant business line that everybody else was going to learn from. So anyway, it's a different way of attacking the problem that you described.
And I'll end on a quick observation. When we get retained, it's usually because it's an expensive, mission-critical type project. And particularly if the call comes in from internal legal and procurement, and maybe because I'm getting on and I have a bit of gray hair and I can do this, but I insist that I have a meeting with the business unit lead, the IT lead, and we all kind of do a mini little agile scrum. We're not standing up though. And I actually cross-examine them on how much time they've got to put into this exercise. Because if you look at the litigation, unfortunately, that comes out of some of these big projects, a consistent theme in the top three is discontinuity of the senior people on both sides. And so you need to set up the terms of success very early on that particular issue. With that, Rishi, back to you to wrap things up.
I think it's a testament to the panel that we always seem to go over for time, and I think if we wanted to, we could stay another hour, but unfortunately, we do have to give up the space. But I do want to thank Mark from Everest Group, Paula from TCS, and Indy from CIBC, and George for hosting us here. Fantastic session. I know a lot of people were taking pictures. As a reminder, next week, we'll post the video of the session, accessible for all members. If there are other people on your team who want to watch, that way they can get caught up, and even for the previous sessions as well. Importantly, as you all know, in 2 weeks, we have our core annual conference. This year, it's all focused on disruption. We have Ted Graham, the head of innovation from GM, Jody Wallace, director from Accenture and artificial intelligence, Patrick Vandenberg, security from IBM, John Armstrong, financial services lead for KPMG, and someone named George Takash, I think you met him today, of course, who's bringing in Harp Alawalia, Technology Solutions. This event sells out every year, and it's free of charge for all members. So do make sure you register, because it always happens. Last week, someone's trying to get in, and we say, you had the opportunity. Make sure you do sign up. Our next two events, December, we'll be having a discussion forum on RPA. We've had members say that we all went to automation, went to this, we thought we were going to save all this money, and it didn't happen. So what happened? So Wipro will be talking us through how to combine RPA with cognitive to drive value. And our next education session is on November 21st and 22nd, all on transition. It's always a headache on what to think about, whether you're going internally or to a provider, or from one provider to another, understanding the people considerations, technology, processes, financial, and cultural change. But Fantastic session today. Again, thank you to our speakers. And if you have any other recommendations for something you want to see for a discussion, forum, or education, please feel free to email myself, Joan, or Hart. We're here if you want to learn more about CORE. But again, thank you to the panel and thank you to George. Fantastic session. Thanks.
Thank you so